Welcome to Voices of Impact and Change, where we amplify the stories behind the stories, the journeys, the breakthroughs, and the voices that are transforming lives. I am your host, Dr. Mack, Chief Visionary Author and Officer of Mack Media and Publishing. This is a series that is dedicated to elevating powerful voices and turning stories into movements. In today's episode, I have the honor of having a special guest who is a part of our I Am Her Fierce, Fearless, and Focused series, where we sit down with incredible women behind the pages of this powerful book. And today, I'm honored to be joined by Teneka Robinson, who is the author of the chapter Seated Without Permission, Embracing Space, Voice, and Authority in Leadership. This conversation is for every woman who has ever felt like she had to wait her turn, shrink her voice, or earn her seat at the table. So, Teneka, I would like to welcome you to the Voices of Impact and Change. How are you today?
Thank you, Dr. Mack, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I think you're speaking my success into fruition because I'm soon to be Dr. Robinson.
Oh, yes, yes. We're going to go ahead and to feature Dr. Robinson on her way. Yes, yes. Well, I'm just so glad to have you here. And I really want to start with your chapter title. For you, what does it mean? What does seated without permission mean to you? And when did you realize that you didn't need permission anymore?
Well, when I thought about what I was going to focus my chapter on, knowing that we're all coming in from various walks of leadership and education, um, it really made me think about all the times where I had a little bit of hesitation, even approaching opportunities where I knew I had done all the right things to position myself, but there was just something holding me back. And we all know it's imposter syndrome. But coming to that point where you have to get out of your own way to just go after the things that you have worked so hard for. So, seated without permission, really kind of spoke to all of those experiences that I had. And, I really wanted to kind of have this chapter encapsulate that, just by highlighting experience, which I know many women have experienced before, where you kind of walk into leadership roles and you feel that you have to ask for the permission where you're the one holding the authority.
Right, right. And I think that is so powerful. And so let's dive a little deeper into your story. Now, take us into a moment and like what was happening in your life when this shift really began. And also,
Well,
like, what did people not see during that time?
it was very early on in my leadership training. And, it was my first directorship that I had been appointed to. And, I was a brazen young, probably in my mid to late 20s. And I just felt that, I was invincible. And, when I had been promoted into this role, I assumed that everyone would just welcome me as I was getting my sea legs in this new position. And it was just a shock when it was completely the opposite. And I experienced a lot of that turmoil from folks on my team, the folks that you thought would kind of help you in strategizing your vision and the ones that you're pouring into to develop, because the whole point of being a leader is to inspire new leaders. And, to have somebody on your team that is just sabotaging your growth and what is it you're trying to do. It took me, it blindsided me, and really I kind of had to take stock of, what it is that I wanted to accomplish in this role. And it was independent of anyone that was present in the department, in the school. And I had to kind of take a moment with myself and say, why am I allowing my professional trajectory to be derailed by the emotions, opinions, or biases that other people have? I can't control that. So it's better to just remove that from the equation and just operate in the authority that I have, going back to not having to ask permission. And the permission that I should be asking for are the ones that dictate anything that I can do insofar as flexing my authority. So that's really where I was in my life and growth. It was just really being I would have to say, very honest with myself in what type of leader I wanted to be. And certainly, very early on, I did not want to be anyone that was seen as being weak or unsure, um, despite what was going on with dynamics with folks that I was having to manage. So for me, it was that reckoning of like, look, I don't have to deal with getting permission from folks, especially if they're not on my level. I'm just going to operate and walk in the fullness of what I've earned. And that is something that I kind of drew out in the chapter that I wrote.
Thank you so much for sharing it. And I love that you talked about authority because that's exactly where I was about to go next. And so I want to talk about your voice and your authority, as you've already mentioned. When did you truly find your voice? Like, when did you feel like that happened?
Honestly, it was in the moments where I felt very unsure. Um, I made a lot of missteps. When you're first walking into leadership, there's not a guide that you're given. So there are a lot of trial and tribulations that I went through. And it was in those moments where I found my voice, where, I had to go into some situations unsure of, myself, kind of fake it till you make it. And that's where I kind of built that confidence, just stepping out on faith. I may not have all the experience now, but even going through it, not getting always the experience right, but I've learned something on the other side. So that's where the voice came about. And for many women, those who are watching, I would say that is something you want to keep, focal as you go through your own respective journeys, is that you're not meant to have all the answers up front. And for me, that's how I've pretty much solidified myself as a leader. It's one of those things where you refine the knows that are, or the knowns that are, built from past experience, and be able to just kind of walk in confidently, knowing that whatever you do come across, you can kind of approach it with some resiliency, knowing that I will be able to approach it and take it on with a level of confidence. And that is just something that I've always wished to aspire.
And what do you think like really kind of help you with those steps to really go into your authority as a leader? Like, did you feel like there were some stepping stones along the way that kind of helped guide you to get there?
I would definitely have to say that there were some mentors who definitely helped along the way, because leadership is not a solo journey. There were some women who had, in their own respective journeys, had gone through very similar things. And I've been very fortunate to have be able to glean on their experience and say, you know what, this is not unique. Maybe the situation that you're finding yourself is in, but you find yourself being in education or in leadership long enough, you find that the same problems surface, just in different ways. And just being able to know that I wasn't alone was very helpful. And then there was a community that I can tap into, not just for, professional edification, but also just for, kind of help bruise the ego and the spirit, when you get down a little bit. And I think that was very helpful in my journey, being able to say, I can't dig. I have no more gas in the engine. I have to tap to someone that can kind of put that mirror up to my face and say, you know what, don't allow minor moments of inconvenience or setbacks kind of dictate or kind of overshadow all of the good that you've done. So those definitely have been the critical, stepping stones for me. And also, as I've been able to kind of refine, walking into that new leadership role, kind of taking stock of my wins. I think oftentimes we get so sidestepped by this isn't going right, or this person is in my way. What are the opportunities where, even in the midst of the challenge, I'm thankful for it because it's now helping better position me for when the next opportunity comes along. So those have been the things that have been tremendously helpful to me.
I love that. I love that. Now, next, I kind of want to just take us to the theme of the book: fierce, fearless, and focus. And it's going to be kind of like a fast round. So, like, whatever comes to mind first, right?
Yes,
And so, for the first question, like, what does being fierce look like for you?
invincible.
Mm,
Someone who, there's no question, when she walks in the room, she is her. I am her. There's no question about it. Her
I love
aura makes
that.
the statement.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're going to go to our next theme, which is fearless. And so, what fear did you have to release to become who you are today?
Um, I think the fear of that's a good question because I have the word, but it's hard kind of encapsulating it. I always just say, relinquishing perfection, because there's no way you can aspire to that, and just being authentic. That's just something that I aspire to. Relinquishing perfection because that's an illusion, and just walking in who you are.
I love that because those are real things that I think we all struggle with, including myself, on a daily basis. Like, you want things to be well, you want it to be perfect timing, and sometimes it holds you back and it's stopping you
Yes,
from moving forward. And so, just releasing that it doesn't have to be perfect and that we can fail forward and learn along the way and
yes, you
take
can.
our challenges as opportunities. And so, I love that. That was definitely a great response. All right. So, our last theme of the book was focus. And so, what keeps you focused as you continue to grow in your purpose?
My North Star is very personal. It's my children. When I think about the type of leader that I aspire to be, and even in and out of fixed roles, they're watching me. And it's in those lessons that I want them to see a model of someone who is resilient, someone who is focused. You have clarity in your vision and your direction and your purpose, and that helps you kind of strategize your life and what is it you're aspiring to. So for me, that's what comes to mind when I think of focus. What type of legacy do I want to leave behind for my children?
I love that. I love that. And so, the next question is really for someone who is listening right now. And so, for that woman who is still waiting to be invited, what would you say to her?
The keys are already in your pocket. You can open any door you want. You don't have to wait for anyone to invite you in. And I will also say, be led by the spirit of discernment. Sometimes we want to be invited in spaces and they are not deserving of our presence and talents, and our gifts. So, know that you hold the keys to your destiny. So the permission is already in your hand. But with that, be led by a spirit of discernment.
I love that. I love that. And then next, I want you to complete this sentence for me. So, I'm going to start the sentence and you're just going to complete the sentence. Okay. So,
Gotcha.
I am her because.
I am her because um, of all the women that have come before me and have been wonderful examples of the her that I am and the her that I am becoming.
I love that. I love that. And before we close out, what does it mean to be seated without permission for you today than it was before?
Oh, well, today, I'm certainly in a space where I am creating my own opportunities and, creating the rooms where folks want to be invited in. So
Yes,
the roles have been reversed. But, for me, it's definitely where I have my moments of reflection, just to kind of see how far I've come in terms of just confidence in who I am and, what I'm aspiring to professionally and personally. And yeah, the permission is mine, and as I'm creating the life that I want, and the legacy that I wish to leave behind, that is something that is unwavering for me.
I love that. I love that. Well, Tanika, thank you so much for sharing your voice, your story, and your impact with us today. And if this conversation, for those of you who are watching or listening in, if this conversation spoke to you, I encourage you to stay connected, share this episode. Also, continue supporting voices that are creating real change in our world. And so, and don't forget, we want you to grab your copy of I Am Her, Fierce, Fearless, and Focused to experience even more powerful stories like this one. And so, if you've been carrying a story, a message, or a voice inside you that the world just needs to hear, this is your reminder that you do not have to wait for permission. At Mac Media and Publishing, we're helping bring those stories to life and turn them into impact. And so, this is Voices of Impact and Change. And I'm Dr. Mac, Chief Visionary Officer of Mac Media and Publishing, reminding you to walk boldly in who you are called to be. Until next time. Thank you again, Teneka, for joining us.
Thank you.